Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Opening scene. Visual. A map of the United States in the early 1800s, with a slow zoom westward as settlers' routes appear across the map. Voiceover. The story of the American westward expansion is one of ambition, exploration, conflict, and transformation. It was a time when dreams of opportunity collided with the realities of a rugged frontier and the rich, complex cultures of Native Americans. The journey westward. Visual. Covered wagons, families traveling on trails like the Oregon Trail, and pioneers forging rivers. Voiceover. In the early 19th century, Americans looked westward with hope and determination. Fueled by the idea of manifest destiny, the belief that it was their divine right to expand across the continent, settlers embarked on arduous journeys. Trails like the Oregon, California, and Santa Fe trails became lifelines for those seeking new opportunities. Visual. Pioneers and wagons traversing the Great Plains, fording rivers, and camping under the stars. Voiceover. These journeys were grueling. Families faced harsh weather, scarce resources, and diseases like cholera. Yet, they pressed on, drawn by promises of fertile land, gold, and the hope of a better future. Manifest destiny and its ideals. Visual. Illustrations or paintings of manifest destiny, showing American settlers pushing westward, often depicted with symbolic imagery like angels or bright light. Voiceover. The belief in manifest destiny became a driving force behind the expansion. Many Americans believed it was their destiny, almost a divine mission, to settle and civilize the Western territories, spreading their ideals of democracy, liberty, and religion. Visual. A map showing the Louisiana Purchase, the annexation of Texas, and the Mexican-American War. Voiceover. Through treaties, purchases, and conflicts like the Mexican-American War, the United States acquired vast territories. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803, the annexation of Texas in 1845, and the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848 expanded U.S. territory dramatically, fueling the desire to push further west. The California Gold Rush. Visual. Panicked scenes of gold prospectors arriving in California, panning for gold, and bustling towns. Voiceover. In 1848, gold was discovered at Sutter's Mill in California, sparking one of the most dramatic chapters of westward expansion. The California Gold Rush saw thousands of eager prospectors rush to the western coast in search of fortune. Visual. Images of crowded mining camps, makeshift towns, and people crossing dangerous landscapes to reach the goldfields. Voiceover. However, the journey to California was fraught with danger. Overland routes took months to complete, and many prospectors found only hardship, while a few found unimaginable wealth. 4. The role of Native Americans. Visual. Indigenous peoples living in harmony with nature, contrasted with settlers encroaching on their lands. Voiceover. As settlers moved westward, they encountered a wide variety of Native American tribes, each with their own distinct cultures, languages, and ways of life. The expansion of the U.S. meant not just the spreading of settlements, but the destruction of native homelands and the disruption of their traditional lifestyles. Visual. Depictions of key Native American leaders like Chief Red Cloud, Tecumseh, and Sitting Bull. Voiceover. While many Native Americans tried to resist or negotiate for peace, others fought to protect their lands. Battles and skirmishes became common, but the U.S. government was determined to assert its control, leading to tragic events such as the Trail of Tears, the Homestead Act of 1862. Visual. Settlers receiving free land and starting homesteads, building small homes, and farming. Voiceover. The government also sought to encourage settlement through the Homestead Act of 1862, which granted 160 acres of public land to anyone willing to improve it by building a house and farming it for 5 years. Visual. Farms springing up on the Great Plains, people working the land, and families thriving in the new territories. Voiceover. This act spurred mass migration, as thousands of families hoped to make a living on land that was virtually free. However, they soon found that the land was often unforgiving, with dry conditions, crop failures, and isolation. The impact of railroads. Visual. Construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. Workers laying tracks. Trains crossing vast landscapes. Voiceover. Perhaps no single force had a greater impact on westward expansion than the railroad. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869 connected the east to the west, allowing for faster, cheaper transportation of goods and people. Visual. Railroads cutting through the wilderness, workers facing dangerous conditions, trains arriving in booming frontier towns. Voiceover. Railroads not only facile. The end of the frontier. Visual. Settlements growing into cities, farming communities thriving, and the landscape changing. Voiceover. By the late 1800s, the frontier had largely been settled. New towns had sprung up, Native Americans had been displaced or forced onto reservations, and railroads had crossed the continent. Visual. A wide view of a bustling western city juxtaposed with a peaceful, untouched wilderness. Voiceover. The promise of manifest destiny had been fulfilled, but it came at a cost. The landscape, the native cultures, and the lives of many settlers were forever altered. The story of the American westward expansion is both a tale of triumph and tragedy, one that continues to shape the United States today. Closing scene. Visual. A modern view of the American West with remnants of old trails, historical landmarks, and natural beauty. Voiceover. The legacy of the American westward expansion lives on, woven into the fabric of American identity. It's a story of perseverance, conflict, and change, a story that is still being written. Encounters with Native Americans. Visual Native American tribes in their traditional settings juxtaposed with settlers arriving. Voiceover. But the westward push came at a high cost. For Native American tribes who had lived on these lands for centuries, this expansion was an invasion. Tribes like the Sioux, Cheyenne, Apache, and Cherokee faced displacement, broken treaties, and violent conflict. Visual. Illustrations or footage of Native American tribes, showing their unique cultures, attire, and daily life, transitioning to images of settlers arriving on horseback or in covered wagons. Voiceover. As settlers moved in, Native Americans were forced to confront the encroachment on their lands. Some tribes attempted to negotiate and adapt, seeking peaceful coexistence with the newcomers. However, many were determined to protect their homelands and their way of life. Visual. Depictions of treaties being signed, followed by scenes of broken promises, violence, and the forced relocation of Native Americans. Voiceover. Tragically, many treaties between Native American tribes and the U.S. government were dishonored. Some tribes attempted to resist through acts of warfare. Iconic battles like the Sand Creek Massacre in 1864 and the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876 illustrated the growing tensions between Native Americans and settlers. Visual. Native American warriors in battle, American soldiers, and the aftermath of these conflicts. Voiceover. These violent confrontations only hastened the forced removal of Native Americans from their ancestral lands. By the end of the 19th century, many tribes had been relocated to reservations, their rich cultures and traditions forever altered by the rapid expansion of the United States. 2. Development of the frontier. Visual, small settlements transforming into bustling towns, railroads being constructed, and fields of crops. Voiceover. Despite the hardships, the frontier began to take shape. The Homestead Act of 1862 played a crucial role in this transformation, offering settlers 160 acres of land in exchange for farming it. This act spurred mass migration, bringing thousands of hopeful families to the West. Visual, pioneers breaking ground, building homes, and planting crops in newly established towns. Voiceover. Though the promise of land attracted many, the settlers faced challenges: drought, harsh winters, and isolation. Yet, they persevered, and in time, small settlements grew into thriving towns. Visual. A series of railroads being built across the landscape, workers laying tracks, trains traveling through the mountains, and new towns developing along the railway. Voiceover. Railroads, the arteries of the American West, were essential in connecting distant regions. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869 allowed for faster transportation of goods and people, making commerce and settlement easier. Visual. Images of bustling towns with wooden buildings, farms surrounding the areas, and a train arriving in a new frontier city. Voiceover. Towns sprung up around the railroads, creating hubs of economic activity, trade, and innovation. The West became synonymous with enterprise and opportunity, attracting miners, farmers, ranchers, and businessmen. Visual. American bison roaming the plains, then the aftermath of their near extinction, with images of hunting parties and empty landscapes. Voiceover. However, this growth came with consequences. The mass cultivation of land, combined with the growing demand for cattle, led to overgrazing and the near extinction of species like the American bison, which played a crucial role in Native American culture and the ecosystem. 3. Closing scene. Legacy of the westward expansion. Visual. A montage of settlers, Native Americans, and the evolving landscape of the West. Voiceover. The American westward expansion.